Covered bridges were very significant in the early growth of Oregon. While some are still used today, most of them serve as historic sites. Cottage Grove is known for its many covered bridges, which are well preserved and appreciated. Oregon has many rivers to be crossed and also a lot of rain, making covered bridges very necessary. The bridges were extra important to the growth of industries like timber and mining, which were booming in Cottage Grove. The area has 6 covered bridges that are still standing today. The first stop is Centennial Bridge, which sits right on Main Street in the historic district. A concrete bridge sits right next to the covered bridge, which replaced most of them. Today, concrete is everywhere, but at the time, lumber was much easier to obtain. Cottage Grove has a lot of enthusiasm for covered bridges. This bridge was created to celebrate the centennial of Cottage Grove. It was built by volunteer labor, and materials came from demolished bridges. Being only from the 80s, it is the youngest covered bridge of Cottage Grove. There was an older bridge here originally called the Main Street Bridge. This bridge sits on the old bridge's abutments, which are the cement supports on each side. While most covered bridges have been lost, Cottage Grove has done a great job at preserving them, earning them titles like Covered Bridge Capital of the West or Covered Bridge Capital of Oregon. The Centennial Bridge is a celebration of covered bridges, which makes it a great one to start this tour at. Up the coast fork of the Willamette a short way is our next bridge. Swinging Bridge is not a covered bridge, but it is still worth mentioning as it is a special historic bridge. This bridge was originally made to give a foot crossing option between the bridges to the north and south. There were many bridges built on this site that became poor condition and got replaced. The original bridge was a rope bridge that would swing side to side, which is why it is now called the Swinging Bridge. The bridge today is a suspension bridge that has a lot of bounce and movement. It's also known as the J. Polk Curran Swinging Bridge. Currin was an early settler that had a store here with land on both sides of the bridge. He also has another covered bridge named after him in Cottage Grove that we'll see later. While it isn't a covered bridge, the Swinging Bridge is a part of Cottage Grove's history and by far the funnest one to walk across. The next nearby bridge is the most impressive structure, the Chambers Bridge. Named for J.H. Chambers, a lumberman who ran a sawmill. Chambers needed this crossing for trains to travel between his sawmill and the timberlands west of town. A spur of the Southern Pacific Railroad was built along with this bridge. While many covered bridges remain, this is the only covered train bridge left in Oregon. Train bridges are more difficult and costly to upkeep with the larger size. An extra tall ceiling and large support lumber were necessary for the heavy loads from timber trains. Its time as a railroad bridge was short-lived. The lumber mill it was meant to serve burnt down. The bridge was abandoned for a while until the city of Cottage Grove acquired it and did a big restoration around 2010. We are all fortunate that some people put in the effort to restore this bridge and preserve its history. The next group of bridges are a bit east of town. One way to get around here is the Covered Bridge's Scenic Bikeway. This trail goes from Cottage Grove to Dorena Reservoir while passing by some historic bridges. Another non-covered bridge is known as the Stand By Me Bridge. In the movie Stand By Me, the kids walked across the steel bridge. Right next to the steel bridge is Mosby Creek Bridge. This original bridge has stood the test of time and is the oldest covered bridge in Lane County. The name comes from David Mosby, who was an early settler who claimed over 1,000 acres of the area. The creek was once named Brumbaugh, but for whatever reason, it was changed to Mosby. Inside, you can see the Howe truss design that most of these bridges have. Howe truss is defined by vertical and diagonal supports on each side, which provide both tension and compression to evenly distribute loads. Being 100 years old, Mosby Creek Bridge is a good reminder that these structures do a great job at preserving the bridges. Another covered bridge on Mosby Creek is Stewart Bridge. The bridge is completely inaccessible today. A big flood in the 60s cracked the bridge's lower chords, which are the outermost members running parallel to the deck. Then heavy snowfall caused the roof to cave in. In the 80s, a concrete bridge was built, bypassing Stewart Bridge. In the 90s, the bridge was restored, but at some point it was closed to the public. Probably because of those damn kids that keep playing hacky sack and TikTok. Mosby Creek flows north into the Row River, which has another covered bridge. Curran Bridge is the second bridge we have seen named after the Curran family of early pioneers. The original uncovered bridge from the 1800s collapsed while a train was crossing. It was later replaced with this covered bridge that would last about 70 years before needing a big restoration. Protecting a wood bridge with a roof can add decades to a bridge's life. Many covered bridges were painted red just like their matching barns. At the time, the red paint was easier to make due to the materials they had, and eventually it just became a tradition. A concrete bridge was built here in the 70s, and the Curran Bridge was closed to traffic. Our final bridge is on the other side of Darina Reservoir, and it is also named Dorena. The bridge was built after the Dorena Dam was completed over the Row River. The name Dorena came from combining two residents' names of Dora and Rena. In the 70s, a concrete bridge was built and the covered bridge was closed to traffic. Now the site is enjoyed by foot and some weddings are hosted here. Dorena is the last of our Cottage Grove covered bridges. Covered bridges were a great invention to fend off the wet and harsh Oregon nature. Now they are something to enjoy the view of and learn about our history. Thankfully, some people, like those in Cottage Grove, decided these historic markers would be worth saving.